And hello, everybody, and welcome to the UnWokable podcast. I am your host, UnWokable, and today I am joined by Maria Seidler of Legal Overwatch for Parents' Rights. Maria, thank you so much for being here today. I'm so excited for this conversation.
Oh, I am too. But
Yeah,
we've been to we've interacted before, but never had a chance to have a good conversation about what you know and what I do. This is going to be
yeah,
great.
yeah. Well, can you? So I think everybody has seen product of your work around the community around the state. You've been involved in some high profile local cases pertaining to parents' rights, whether it's with school boards, whether it's dealing with uh, freedom of speech issues, and lots of education things. But can you tell us what Legal Overwatch is and what is your mission?
Our mission is to do just what we've been doing. I watch for those issues where I feel like a parent is being denied a statutory right, a constitutional right, uh, the Parents' Bill of Rights, that whole list, where it pertains to school and their children's education. We don't get involved in DHS type cases. That's
Yeah, that's a whole
neither
different ball of wax,
ball
right?
game. You're right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But when it comes to what the school board is doing, making sure that parents are still the guiding, controlling voice over their children.
No, well, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you are a non-for-profit organization, right?
That's why I formed it. I saw too often where the school boards, and it's sometimes an overused word, but it sort of fits in a lot of these situations, tyrannical. They
Mm,
have so much power. They probably have more power over our lives than any other governmental agency or entity.
how
And
so? How so? Can you in what ways do they have more power, or do they have so much power?
uh, let me put it in, I'll sort of put it in this phrase. How many
Uh,
parents say they've raised their kids to be good conservatives, but after they kind of graduate from high school, suddenly they don't know their kids. They don't, their kids fight with them over, cultural things as well as
right.
politics. I mean, they just suddenly, like, their kids are strangers and they don't believe the way they believe anymore.
Yeah. So you're saying that the school boards have outsized influence over families because of the policies and things they allow in the schools or require administrators and teachers to do with the kids in the school, right? So you're talking
Yeah.
about they have direct influence over the way our society progresses because of their influence over what kids are actually exposed to.
See, I knew you'd be able to vocalize these issues much more. But it's not. It shouldn't be a surprise.
Yeah.
We It used to work because we had a shared value system. Even if we were Democrats or Republican, there was some kind of basic shared value system. Uh, and now the political agenda has shifted. The cultural agenda has shifted, and we are more divisive. And the school boards have picked a side, and it's not on the side of Christians. It's not on the side of conservatives, and I use that in a cultural way, not political. I'm real disappointed that I think conservatives have become more of a political term than what it's
Hmm.
supposed to mean. I sometimes use the word conservationist
Hmm.
because a conservationist is trying to assess the environment for a particular species, right, and maintain it so that species can thrive, can
Hmm.
grow, develop, and thrive. Well,
Well, that's the difference between
conservatives,
like, I'm sorry, that's the difference between like being a conservationalist and an environmentalist, right? It's like,
right,
yeah, it's the difference between
good
Teddy
point,
Roosevelt and what's her name, the just any activist, right? It's
right.
there's a difference. So I think that's really great. Uh, Let me ask one kind of this is for me really, and for my
Yeah.
audience, obviously, but when you talk about conservatism in the law, right? I think of, Scalia, right? And he had a very specific way of defining what, textualism or conservatism is in the law. Is that along the lines of what you're seeing? And I'm trying to make a bridge here with your frustrations about the term conservatism, because he didn't seem to couch conservatism in a political way. It was a, hey, we need to actually conserve what is written on the paper,
Well,
right?
that's a good way to describe what he did. That's, using my own language back. That's great. Uh, but that there is a frustration when the judges who are originalists do something we don't like, and
Yeah.
it rules against us. But for them, you're right. It's looking back and what does the paper really say, and well, it didn't give us Roe versus Wade, so yeah, that's a great decision. But at the
Right.
same time, there are things that maybe especially around freedom of speech and establishment clause, there may be
Hmm.
some really good decisions out there that we don't like, and we saw where they're going.
Yeah.
But at least they're sticking to what we always refer to as the rule of law. You know, I went through law school and I really didn't have a handle on what is the rule of law.
Hmm.
If you ask me,
Really, really. So what is
really,
the rule of law?
I finally saw a video. I wish I can remember who it was, and uh, it wasn't a national recognized, but some just young guy talking, and that was the best explanation. The law uh, is supposed to stay. The law itself has its own lane to stay in, and there's a hierarchy that's created, and that is where the rule applies. Is sticking to that hierarchy, and so you know the foundation of that hierarchy is the Constitution. There is no United States of America. There is no, U.S. Congress. There's no federalism. All of that we have constructed our society around starts with that Constitution. If you think of government, in the social contract way,
Hmm.
uh, right? That was the contract in which people of a state came together and said, "We'll join with these other states." So that's the base. That is the fundamental place of law starts for the United States, and then you have Congress that makes the laws to implement that Constitution.
Okay.
And the Constitution tells them this is your lane now, and you have to stay in it. Not that they have. And then you have the states that have enacted their own constitution. But when they did, they had to agree to the supremacy of the federal constitution. So and then those states' constitution has given the power to make laws to the to our legislatures, and then they give a certain amount of law to the government. So this whole structure of how laws are created and how they're supposed to be enforced is the rule of law. But we have so dismantled that with probably the number one evil is the administrative agencies, whether they're at the federal level or the state level. Because what's the Constitution? You have one branch that legislates, one
Right.
branch that enforces and executes, and then another branch to adjudicate. And they have meshed all three branches into one agency.
Well, and that gets us into what I think that you started legal Overwatch to kind of put a leash around, right? Is this
Yeah,
administrative tyranny over the people? Because I've often explained this, and correct me if I'm wrong, that kind of what you just explained was you have the law, right? Then you have the people, and in between the two is this public policy area, which
right.
is garnered, and actually the enforceable parts of the law are administrated by this public policy managerial state. so to speak,
Yeah,
right?
managerial's a good term.
Right, where it's they, and you even see this more in Oklahoma, correct me if I'm wrong, because we have a rules process which is different from other states, right? And you can explain this to me, but or if I'm explaining this wrong, but it's the legislature passes a bill, then it goes to another smaller committee where they actually write the details of the bill and how it's going to be enforced, and then that's passed by the rules committee, and so not even by the whole legislature. And so it's like you have this mini legislature within the legislature. You've got this, it's almost as if the legislature writes a bill that looks good for everybody, and then they send it off into the dark to say, okay, now you tell us exactly what the bill is going to do.
You know what I call that? I call that a headline bill.
Oh
You
yeah,
know,
we've got tons of those in Oklahoma, don't we? Oh my
I, I,
goodness.
I think one of the most powerful things I heard Nathan Don say last term, I think he was doing some kind of video from his hotel room and he was scruffy and you could tell he was exhausted. And he was talking about how much more he had to read on the legislation for that term. You know, now we're supposed to be a part time
Okay.
legislative, right? We're supposed to
Right.
be part time. And why, how is a part time legislature writing, thousands of pages of bills? How does anybody really, we may be red, but we follow a Democrat, Democrats in Congress's roadmap. Like, well, you'll know what's in it when it's passed,
Yeah, yeah.
right?
Right.
You
Well,
know,
but that is, am I correct about that process where they 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 write bills, they're a page or two long oftentimes. They may expand over the process, but then it's sent to a rules committee, right? And it's sent to a group of people. Sometimes they're not even formally involved in the government, right? You may have think tanks
yeah.
or
Well, I do think think
lobbyists,
tanks have too much influence. No,
right?
no offense, OCPA.
Right.
But, everybody's got their blind spots, and, think tanks have to rely on contributions. And,
Yeah. They have a board,
yeah, well, they have a board and they're looking for money to come in. I mean,
right?
and so it's hard to be a pure think tank. I know this for a fact because my husband, who's a lawyer but never been a practicing lawyer, spent 30 some years at the DOE. He's one of the top careers person, and then he left and he
The
started a
DOE
think
being the Department of
Department
Energy.
of Energy. Yeah,
Hmm. No, it's okay.
anyway, Department of Energy, and then he left and he started a think tank because he believes in free markets and he believes in the free market around energy. And he was part of a major rule writing to deregulate natural gas pipelines. So he understands these issues quite intimately, very large depth. And he started a think tank, and it went well so long as we had the Enrons and the Dynergies, wanting that market space to open up.
Hmm.
But when Enron fell and people started to get nervous, his funding dried up. you
Ah,
know,
I
they
see.
wanted him to talk about something else, So, he eventually closed that down and but we started trying to
Well,
look at other things on
right.
markets.
Well, what all this is to say is that what we're hitting on here is that there's this giant administrative state between the people and the law, between the legislature and the law. And to getting into what it is that that legal Overwatch is doing is you're trying to help parents navigate that in terms of some of these social issues pertaining to what books are in schools or what uh, is in the curriculum or what parents actually get to see or
Yeah.
even how often parents can be involved, right? That's
Well,
kind of.
that's just currently. I didn't think about legal Overwatch, but uh, my initial interest when I moved back was the lack of education my grandchildren was getting. And to
Mm,
give some other context was before law school, I was working on my PhD in English, and my goal for, or objective for getting my PhD was to direct freshman composition.
Hmm.
Uh, when I got my master's, I was a teaching assistant. We were teaching freshman comp, and so I'm 67, so we're talking in my 20s. And you know what? Kids couldn't write then.
Yeah.
They could barely. And these are college freshmen that we were having to break down uh, symptoms in order to figure out an alternative
What
way.
year? What years? Like this is in the 80s or
Late 70s,
oh,
early
late
80s.
70s. So okay,
Yeah.
late 70s, early 80s. Okay.
Yeah, and so, I was frustrated then and was doing all the reading about teaching methods, how to teach critical thinking. Uh, so, I still care. And then life happens, and I ended up moving over to get my law degree.
Hmm.
But that awareness you can't undo, and we kept seeing it, circle, just downward spiral. And in Oklahoma, it's been a worse downward spiral. Why? I don't know.
Well, there seems to
I've
be a
been trying to
breakdown of
understand
language.
that.
There seems
Oh,
to be a
yeah,
let's talk about that for just a second, and we're going to get into some of the things
yeah,
that you've been working on. But I for the simple fact that you are wanted to be an English comp major, I've been talking about language here lately anyway, and I
yeah,
think the breakdown of critical theory and critical race theory and all of these, the way I've seen critical race theory and using not the strict legal sense of the word, but it derives from critical legal studies.
right.
And what it seems to me is that if you can change the definitions of words, then you can change the law without having to change the law,
You're
right?
you're exactly right.
Right. And so
Uh,
to what we teach kids about what the definitions of words are, whether that's racism, whether that's discrimination, whether that's, you know,
I'll give you one that I bet you know a lot about, but it
okay.
should demonstrate what we're seeing going on just in the moment about this sex education.
Mm,
Pedophilia. They
okay.
are fighting hard to change the context and therefore the meaning of what it means to be a pedophile.
What okay, what how so? Can you
There are,
and who is they? Real quick. Who is
well,
they?
I should say it's the same people that we look at for creating the critical race theory, right?
Okay, okay. So the kind of woke left, for lack of a
The
better term, the woke left. Okay, so
academians in the law school,
okay.
that are writing all the fancy legal, uh, scholarly
The experts,
papers.
right?
And if you start to dig down in the law schools about what is being written, people who are you probably would have seen them on the sense of social justice
Mhm.
is turning that eye to what it means and and how pedophilia should be treated. If they can shift it to be understood as a disease, as somebody, and it's
So
more
you're saying
limited.
that the change they're trying to hold on, and I'll let you go. The change they're trying to make is uh, this term, and I don't know how YouTube is going to mess with this because YouTube likes to censor me. So let's say that let's say the P word from now on. So they're taking that
Okay.
term, and they're taking that term and what was a psychological term describing somebody's predilections, and
Yeah.
then uh, that was weaponized societally by the law in certain statutes. You know, whether that's you know things like that. They're now trying to say that it's a little bit like they've defined alcoholism now,
Yeah.
which alcoholism is a disease. It's not a addiction, so to speak, right?
Right.
Is which gives you in
Well, yeah,
society.
you're getting there, but this is going to be. We haven't alcoholism. It's sort of well, it's we've kind of accepted that it's yeah,
Yeah, it's a
it's
little
a
bit of a disease,
disease,
and
even though
right,
it's
but
sort
this
of
is
been
not. It's not a direct
created.
apples to apples comparison. I'm saying
But
that
yeah, you
that
don't have the impact it's going to have on the law. Now, I am talking way something I just ran across. So
right.
I don't want to be held completely 100% to it. But I do think that when the last Supreme Court justice, and I forget her name because I guess I want to forgive her name, forget her name.
Oh, you're
But
talking about Jackson.
yeah,
Yeah, the most recent.
recent one who didn't know what a woman was or didn't
Right.
want to
Yes. Yes.
say, right?
Yeah. Hmm.
But I think if you dig into some of her writing, she starts to talk about, how uh, what she sees as failure of the criminal law system, and it starts to talk about this issue around pedophilia. And it wouldn't have hit me at all uh, when I was just trying to live my life and you know
Right. Right.
on and worry about environment. But in the light of how much pedophilia we're seeing, that it bubbles up to the headlines, and the lack of seriousness with which even the most headline cases are being treated, it hasn't outraged hardly anyone. And so, and then you see people like this kind of writing on it. Again, our children are going to be susceptible to this change in law that's going to allow these guys in and out and not be punished. And I don't know that they can be punished. I mean, if it's a predilection, but I still want them locked away from my
So
kids.
what you're saying is that they're trying to change the term to make it more socially acceptable, and that will, if you change the definition of it actionably without through experts saying, well, this is what it is, this is what we've said it was, then if you change that definition of the word, it will affect laws already on the books to make them less effective in protecting kids from those kinds of people.
Right
Right. Right.
now, let's remember before we engaged your audience,
Uh-huh.
we were talking about the links. Take that link
Hmm.
now, link it to what you know a lot about. You
Hmm.
know the 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 gender
Hmm.
issues in the school
Right.
and how we're messing around with kids' ability to discover who they are, which
Mhm.
includes their gender.
Right.
What it means to them. You know that, and so they're more confused than ever because the hyper focus is on gender, and then the next hyper focus is sex, and
Right.
now you have this much more lax attitude about playing around with kids.
Well, what they're doing there is they're conflating all of it. They've turned gender. What that is really just personality traits, right? It's like they've made it the term gender. Okay, well, if you are a boy who happens to like to play with dolls when you're 7, then that means that your gender is probably not what you it's not male or female, it's something in the middle, or it's opposite of what you are, when really all you could be is a more feminine man, or a boy, because
Or
and
more
then they've
a more
conflated that.
nurture, right? Nurturing
Right, right,
person. Yeah.
right, and what they then they conflate that all with sex and say, well, if you're a female and your personality is more masculine, then that must mean that you need hormone therapy and trans surgeries and things like that. And that's they're meshing all of these terms through the language, and they've
Well,
used the
yeah.
term gender to do that.
Oh, yeah. The fact that there really isn't a gender. They're
Right.
they're
Well,
gonna
it's a
they're gonna
social. If
push
you want to.
gender out of the dictionary.
Right. Well, no, it's sex, biological sex. You are a male or you are a female. Right. Now, your personality, and everybody is a mixture of different uh, traits. Right. You may have a masculine man, right, that looks masculine, that is a crier, right? That would be considered a feminine trait, and but that doesn't mean that that man needs to go take hormones and change his sex. And adults can wrap their brain around that better, but children, if you start injecting that idea into kids from a very early time and confusing them, it's conversion therapy, right? It's conversion therapy. And
Well,
so,
yeah, but we're and because they're taught to be fluent, they're taught to be open-minded about these things, they lose the ability to assess a dangerous situation.
Hmm.
And uh, and therefore they become victimized by older people when they're developing stage because they're confused, and so we get pedophile. I'm surprised that nobody has talked about genderqueer,
Yeah.
that book,
Hmm.
and that's an autobiographical book,
Yes, it is. Yeah. No,
right?
and the funny
But
part about
what
the end of that book. Well, you go ahead. You go ahead. What was your point?
Well, yeah, you're gonna say he's teaching this, he's passing on what he learned. But we know that when kids are sexually abused when they're younger, they tend to turn into sexual abusers when they're older. I mean, you know, I don't think that that's a controversial therapeutic conclusion, but that book is autobiographical about a kid who gets sexually abused by
Hmm.
adults,
Hmm.
and then then to feel, and his therapeutic way of working through it and saying it was okay, I'm still okay, I'm not a victim, was to write this book to say it's okay to be victimized.
Right. Well,
um
and at the end of
that
it, he
that
becomes a teacher. That he becomes
right.
a teacher, right?
They
And
can't
tells it.
see People can't see that that's what it is, that when you're buying this book and celebrating it, that you're celebrating uh, the sexual abuse of that man when he was a
Right.
child. Doesn't that bother people? But
Well,
I hear about the sex scenes, I hear about the language, but
but
there
nobody knows what the actual story of the book is. Right. And
right,
that
yeah,
is way more. And that's why I am really to get into now we're going to get into it here, okay?
yeah,
Kids, the bright shiny thing. Obviously you're going to gain attention by saying okay, there's porn in schools, right?
right.
And that is obviously something that needs to be stopped. And but what I've been trying to tell people is what the real danger is what you're describing here about genderqueer. Because you could take all the pictures out or make the
Right.
pictures less graphic. You could and still have the underlying message that's actually doing the most harm. Which is it's glorifying and normalizing a a
It's
situation that kids may face in it and making that normal and saying this is you can do this and be virtuous or you can do this and become something else completely.
do they really think the compassionate response to a story of a child that's being sexually abused is, oh, let's buy the book and read it? I mean, the compassionate response is, how did this happen? And that the fact that this guy once needs to write his story that is so tragic, and we don't cry over the tragedy. How can we say we're actually compassionate people? Uh, and I don't want to take away from the fights of all the
Right.
parents and the
No,
Moms
of
for
course.
Liberty group against
Right.
pornography in the school. But we shouldn't. I'm so glad you must have already been there before I raised it because you grabbed it so fast. That there are people like you that's understanding. These books are really books of the failure of our society. How can we correct it? Not how can we spread it?
Right. Right. And that is a huge issue. That's a huge issue because it's it, we're going to be distracted by the bright shiny thing and
Right.
we're going to miss the forest for the trees. And that's why I've engaged a little bit, when it comes to language and what we deem socially acceptable or acceptable within say what you want out in the town square. But in schools, there needs to be an etiquette, there needs to be a protocol, and there needs to be and parents need to understand who are against the porn in schools. They need to understand that what they're teaching because education begins at home, right? And what they're teaching, or it should, and what they're teaching their kids at home to say and think and read and all those kinds of things will bleed into what some teachers or administrators of these radical activists will grab a hold of and use to their advantage, right? And so
Right.
we need to conserve, going back to what we started about, we need to conserve some um, cultural, if you want to say Judeo-Christian, you don't even have to put it that way, just some boundaries of what we say and do with kids, because from both the home front and the school front, because these two things feed each other. They're not, they intersect. They're not, they don't live in a vacuum. And parents need to be very careful about, if they're going to be against these issues, which they should be, what it is that they say and do to their kids when they're at home, and how that will bleed. That's all. That's my point. But let's get into a little bit, because I think that's great, because now the issue of the porn in schools, one of your bigger cases has been about the Waso school board, right?
Right.
And there, first of all, it sounds like you really did well in that case, in terms of the way you filed things, the arguments you made, the rulings that you got. Can you explain to us how that was such a win? Because I think that gets lost. I think it gets a little bit lost, because oftentimes you see in media, or you see in the news, or you see with other people talking about it, that, well, we got this, but what we want is money, or what we got this, but what we want is this ruling. So they kind of diminish what can be really considered real legal wins, that people don't understand are real, like, kind of abnormal legal wins, because, well, we haven't got what we want yet. So can you just explain that situation, and what you did, and why it was so successful?
Well, of course, it did start with one parent who got
Hmm.
banned for 6
Hmm.
months. Now,
Right. Got banned from being on the school
on the
premises.
school grounds, any
Right.
school, being able to take his kids, and it's, uh, and talking about, getting, just looking at the shiny thing. The thing that I thought was unusual in how people approached that case, I mean, from a PR, is it was a freedom of speech case. Okay, that's how we won. But for me,
Hmm.
it was a parents' right case. I was more moved when I talked to Tim Ryland, the parent,
Hmm.
about the fact that he couldn't go see his kids in a play.
Right.
You know, that's where we get conservatives who love their families. That's
Right.
where we get our joy.
It's
Seeing our kids
access to
succeed.
your child in a school that you help pay for.
Well,
Yeah,
it's
what I
it's
mean?
access to your kids in the major part of their day, and
Right.
in what is giving them fun. I mean, you know, you see your kid up on stage. Now, you're not quite yet there,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
You're
yeah.
yeah, you're
Right.
but when he takes those first two steps,
Hmm. Hmm.
it's a moment of joy. So when he gets up on stage and sings a solo, it's a thing of joy. I mean, you're so proud. This is how
Yeah.
we build our family relationships. And when your dad don't come,
Right. Yeah.
I
And
mean,
when
I
the
can
law,
remember when
and
my
so,
dad had to
yeah, so
work
when
and
the
didn't
law,
make.
so when the school board prevents bans somebody from being able to participate in their own child's education in a physical way,
in,
that
in,
is,
in their
that's the
lives,
struct, right, then their life, because that's their child,
their
and
lives.
they should have access to their kid anywhere their kid is, period,
Yeah, yeah,
100%.
yeah.
So although they couched it as a free speech case, you thought of it more as an access case, as a parental rights case.
Right.
And so explain to us.
That's why I took it on,
Right.
because and uh, and I have another case of a parent being banned for 6 months that I couldn't bring a free speech claim at all. But to me, it's still the bullying tactic of the school board. They have that power. So we
The
talked about
managerial
that.
class that we've identified here, that,
Right.
right, that
Right.
are
It's how
elected,
they're going to keep you in line.
right, how they're going to keep you in line. So what was it? Can you just explain to us the wins here? So they banned him, right? And what is it that
We
you filed? What is it
we
that you filed to stop what happened?
well, we thought the first thing was, um, and again, I was driven because one of Tim's ways to earn for his living was being an Uber Eats, Grubhub driver, and
Right.
it tends to be that during the day, a big part of that business is on different school campuses.
Sure.
So, we needed to stop the bleeding there. I wanted him quick access. So we wanted that ban. Uh, we wanted the court to stop that ban from being enforced as soon as we can. So that's where you file for a temporary restraining order, restrain them from enforcement. But those you can go in. Those tend to be a one-sided discussion between the lawyer wanting the TRO and the judge, and you have to demonstrate you've got certain loopholes. But one of them is you got to show that you have a good chance of winning. But
Mhm.
the second is that there's that the plaintiffs are being harmed, and you can't for whatever period the ban is on, and he can't get damages for that. So that's one of the issues that come up with these school cases is lawyers who's you know if you can't pay them an hourly rate, they want to be able to make sure you have damages that they can hook a contingency on, and it can be up to 30%, but that usually takes actual damages or some way to measure damages. These cases, well, we did have some from his second income, but how do you measure the damages of that you missed your kid running a touchdown?
Mhm.
You
Right.
know? So
It's
or
unquantifiable, right? It's
right,
unquantifiable. Mhm.
and some of these parents, when you look across the news and see who's getting banned, they're missing their kids' graduation. You know, that's we demonstrated that relative to the way the ban separates the parent from the child during that school day and
Mhm.
activities. So that was something you might not see where you have to have uh, a lawyer that has to earn this living this way. So that was an advantage to me as a nonprofit. I could take this case on. I wasn't worried about money damages, and we could prove, you know, one thing
So
I
you
think
weren't
I'm good
worried
at
about the
is
money
telling a
damages.
story. So I could tell a really heartbreaking story to this judge. They are
Right.
human. But I still have to, show that we could win on the injury. And because he was talking on a political topic,
Uh-huh.
the language they complained at was totally connected, associated with their political action. I mean, I made a point to the judge, he never called he didn't call Brent England, the school
Mhm.
board person he was arguing with, he never called him a four-letter word. He only said the policy is bull, blah blah blah.
Right.
you know, and that is freedom of speech, and because it was about the books, the judge. I got to be thankful for Trump. This is a Trump appointee who believed in originalism. He immediately understood that this was a pretense pretext, that
Okay.
they weren't really punishing him for for what he said out in the parking lot. They're punishing him for criticizing and using his speech to criticize their policy.
Right.
He got that. If I had got an activist judge in there, they could have ignored that
Okay.
argument we were making. Hey, you shouldn't be
So
using bad language in the parking lot and yelling at somebody.
when you said you weren't worried about money damages, what do you mean by that?
I can go for if you think about a lot, the Parents' Bill of Rights, and
Mhm.
and there's about three things in it that are listed in those rights that I look at. One is the parent's right to determine the education of their child, the
Okay.
parent's right to determine how he's going to be brought up, upbringing. And then the other one is the parent's right to determine the religious and moral training uh, of the child. Now, that bill should be so powerful. Can you imagine if we could sue on the right of parents to determine the moral upbringing of their children in
Yeah.
relation to this transgender stuff, in
Hmm.
relation to these books? But it's not being used. And this sort of links us into the legislative question we're talking about.
So what do you mean it's not being used?
How many? I would challenge anybody listening to look up, the Oklahoma Parents Bill of Rights and find cases on it. Finding cases, how it's enforced, finding cases, how it's interpreted. Uh, it's
So is it
not
window
being
dressing,
done.
or does it have teeth? Could you use it?
Well, the best I did was in the Bryce Chafin case,
Okay.
and that's when I did all my research on it, because he came in to talk about the Stillwater transgender bathroom
Okay, so
policy
this
that
is
they
Bryce
were
Chevins, a parent
implementing.
in Stillwater. I'm just going to give for
Yeah,
anybody who may watch. It's a parent in Stillwater who came in, and he came in to talk, and who was upset about some of the things going on in Stillwater, Oklahoma schools. And so he
right.
came to the school board. Okay, go ahead.
Came in the school board. Now, so many other parents did, but he brought his religious training that knew the scripture and knew
Hmm.
what sin is called in the scripture, and he laid that out. He was laying that foundation, and they started to cut him off.
Hmm.
They didn't. He never got to even raise the transgender bathroom policy because, a good preacher lays his
Right. Yeah.
scriptural
Yeah.
background, and then he shows you how this is sin.
Hmm.
But uh, so we sued under the Oklahoma Religious Freedom Act. I didn't bring up the U.S. constitutional free speech. I made a conscious decision, and I still don't know if this is going to play out well, but we have some good laws in Oklahoma, and we need to build some court opinions supporting those laws, and and uh, you know we because having those laws and seeing them enforced could make Oklahoma really the biblical, or what is it, the biblical state, that
Right.
everybody used to think we were, for better or for worse,
Right.
right?
But
But
okay.
it's a very strong law that second gives attorneys the right to collect attorney fees when you sue under it,
Okay.
and you can get to some extent damages. You can find a way to measure it. So we took on that case. Now that was Bryce's issue. But what I was also concerned with was how they treated him. I mean, I don't know if your audience have seen, but it's
Yeah.
very prevalent on Facebook.
Yeah.
Him being escorted out by police. He had a whole minute left to give his speech. He could have tied it up, but they sent the police to escort him out. That's intimidation.
Yeah.
And Bryce is such a evangelical Christian of such strength of faith that he would do it again. But how many parents would? The chilling effect that that incident, and seeing the parents carried out in Fairfax and Virginia, all of that intimidation effect, uh, is a chilling effect that is a violation of the law itself. You know, so because I had rope, we made rope a party to the case to argue that by using their intimidation tactic, they're trying to back parents off from their rights to have influence over their kids, religious, moral, upbringing and education. We made it. We got to use it as a as damages and injury. We couldn't see. In fact, the school board tried to dismiss our case by saying there's no cause of action for violating Parents' Bill of Rights. And you read the law, and there's nothing there. The Religious Freedom Act has a clause that says if you're injured, if your religious rights are violated, that's an injury, and
Hmm.
you can sue and you can get damages and we can get attorney fees. Uh,
So, but they said there's no cause of action for the Parents' Bill of Rights
right.
for that law.
No teeth. And
No
that's where
teeth.
you get no teeth.
So
Why
could we?
pass it?
No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, why
What?
why memorialize those rights if we're not going to have, and it's because it's not a constitutional right, it's a statutory right.
Okay.
So how do you, you know, how can they mean something to you if every time you go to court they're going to kick you out?
It seems to be one of those title bills, like you'd said. Some of the right
Well,
where
we're tooting it and we're using it and we're waving the flag that you're violating it because I mean, so it has a rallying purpose, but from
it has
me,
no. Yeah, for a lawyer, it's
and
useless.
I might, maybe I could get it, and if I find the right case, I want to make sure it's the exact right case, right? Because
Hmm.
facts can make bad law. You may
Mm.
have a good law, but if you had bad facts, and that's a saying lawyers have, there's one. If you don't have the law, argue the facts. But if a lawyer can't argue the law, and then they have bad facts, then you're going to find out that they're going to make a ruling that's applicable to, as legal precedent. And then when you have good facts, you can't use it. We have a
Well,
lot of bad laws, like bad
uh,
opinions like that.
well, and let me ask this: would it help you as a lawyer who would like to use the Parents' Bill of Rights as in court for our legislature to go in and add teeth to that statute?
I have actually talked, Sherry Conley
Yeah,
is
great.
a
She's
great
awesome.
education advocate
Hmm.
and with and understands the Christian construct we want to try to conserve for our
Hmm.
schools. So, and I have talked to her about that. We haven't sat down and really said, well, what does it need to be? We have talked about whether the uh, Religious Freedom Act provision that gives a cause of action and et cetera, attorney fees, something like that added to it. But I do hope that they might take this up. I, they could do so much for parents' causes by providing lawyers more incentive to take these cases than they could trying to write a bill,
Oh,
on,
so
that
when you
cookie
say
jar.
offering incentive to take the cases, what do you mean by that?
That if you take it, you can get your attorney fees if you win.
So that
This is
so they could.
let me give you one example just real quick.
Okay.
So my husband goes to this Thursday morning men's breakfast thing, and there was a lawyer sitting at his table, and he's telling him, you know, about my case and that it happens to have attorney fees. He said the guy leaned forward and his eyes got big. He goes, "It does?" And well then, they find the right case, they
So
don't have to
wait a
worry
minute.
about.
So hold on. So we could, and correct me if I'm wrong. That the legislature might be able to fix a whole host of the problems we're seeing in schools if they were to add an incentive for the lawyers in the Parents' Bill of Rights and add maybe a statutory damages claim to that to the law itself. So amend the law and say, okay, if these are violated by school districts, lawyers who take the case for parents could get their attorney's fees ordered by the school board. Then that would
Yeah.
that would be enough almost to actually stop a lot of the things, because then lawyers like you or others would be incentivized to go in and say, oh yeah, I'll take that case, because I
Yeah,
know I can win that case on the merits, and the school board's going to pay me money.
right. Now, we do need on the flip side of that uh, to make clear that school boards don't get attorney fees. If they take a case, uh, and I think I read the Religious Freedom Act as saying that the only way that that a government agency can get attorney fees, uh, should a plaintiff lose under that excuse me, under that act, is if the plaintiff acted with fraud, was frivolous. There was there was no way the plaintiff was ever going to win. He's just
Hmm.
trying to create, enough nuisance value to walk away with some money. So, and so it puts a lot of constraints about when, and this is big issue for me right now because we did lose, on supposedly on the merits, and did some interesting kind of
We were talking
circumstance.
about Bryce Chaffin's case, right?
Bryce Chaffin, yes. But now, the final judgment is in favor of the school board, and they're throwing around about petitioning for their attorney fees. Again, I'm not worried, but it's still a battle I'm going to have to fight if they move
Right.
forward. But
So
I
that
feel protected because they can't prove fraud and they can't prove, um, frivolousness on our
right,
part at all.
right. So you're saying that there needs to be a if a single parent sues a school board, there needs to be the ability over the parental bill of rights. There needs to be a statute that offers the attorney the opportunity to seek attorney's fees, but it shouldn't be reciprocal because the school board is an entity beyond a single parent
Real
claim.
deep pockets.
Right, real deep pockets, government pockets, right? And so
Yeah.
it would make sense there. It's like, wait a minute, you shouldn't have a government agency be able to seek attorney's fees. You know,
And 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 the typical rule on these things, is that the prevailing party has the right to petition the court and ask for attorney fees. Now, they don't get them automatically, and and even under the typical rule, in a case like Chafin's, uh, they would look at the circumstances of the plaintiff, and whether he had a good faith cause of action,
mhm.
so they may or
Okay,
may not, but it's still a risk, and we need to make sure that's cut.
right. Okay, well, real quick, I want to. We didn't get to the point that I wanted to on the Wasso case. What is it that the? Let's talk about the TRO there because
Uh,
the TRO, that's not a normal thing, right? I mean, what you won there
well,
was a
mm,
big deal,
yeah.
right?
Well, it's not on this kind of case. I mean, we see them
Okay.
all the time in
Right,
domestic.
yeah, yeah, no, I'm
Yeah,
talking about
right.
it in this kind of a
Different.
case. That's okay. In this kind of a case, the what you achieved in having a judge or two rulings block the decision of a school board is not a normal thing in these kinds of cases, and that was a big deal. Can you just
It,
explain what
it,
happened there?
well, this is how strategy can you get be careful with strategy, or be careful with thinking. Um, we do
Legal
this all
strategy.
the time,
Right,
right?
right, right,
Yeah.
right.
I mean, the law firm that represented Owasso is the same one that represented, Stillwater.
What is the name of the law firm?
Uh,
If you
some
don't, it's okay.
Rothstein and something and Ringgold.
Okay.
They're in Tulsa. Get this. This is an interesting statistics, and they bragged this to me. So I haven't looked it up, but they're the ones who
Uh-huh.
told me this is true. They represent 300 of the 500 school boards in Oklahoma.
Interesting.
So, this concerns me, and I think there's only one other that can really competes with them in size like that out of Oklahoma City.
Mhm.
But if you think about only 2 or 3 law firms that are giving out the legal advice and providing, the legal theories across all of these school boards, that's a monopoly of ideas.
Okay.
Uh, and so when the school board starts saying, well, we can't do that because we can't take those books out because that it's
Right.
against the law. We have the what PICO case, blah blah blah. That's one law firm telling all of these schools what the law is, and
Oh, I see. So you're talking about a monopoly of this same, and Lord knows who funds, because you can have lots of people on the board. You can have lots of people that are different partners that have different business interests, that represent other companies, that represent other interests in the state, whether that's energy, whether that's civil rights law, whether they're not limited to education law. Probably they probably have different partners who have expertise in different areas and take on different. And you're saying that because this one law firm represents over 300 of the 500 school districts, that they could have an outsized kind of shadow influence in what is actually going on in the schools, because they're telling the schools what is legal and what isn't. And then it's their job to protect the school based upon that advice and the advice they're giving. So it's almost like this kind of unified,
incestuous.
yeah, this unified shadow influence over the
Yeah.
law and the way that school boards across the state interpret the law. And that has a direct effect. I don't know, it seems very managerial to me. It seems very,
It
like what we
bothers
talked about at the
it,
beginning.
it, it bothers me, and I have no idea of how the nexus between these few school law firms with the OSSB.
Hmm.
Now the OSB has their own in-house lawyers, but even then they're just a handful.
Right.
So you have this whole area of law that's really being determined and interpreted by a handful of people.
And if
Uh,
nobody ever takes them to court, hold on, no, let me just make this
yeah,
point. If nobody ever takes them to court like you and tries to reinterpret their interpretation stands,
yeah,
right? If nobody,
yeah.
right?
Well,
Am I
and
wrong?
very few people are fight. And again, we go back to there's not a whole lot of lawyers challenging these policies. Where lawyers get involved with school cases is usually torts. You know,
Okay.
where you're on school grounds and they didn't do something. It was a big hole and you fell. Right?
Right.
Is there
Somebody got hurt.
liability?
Yeah.
I and I'm in doing research. I see what pops up is a lot of. Cases where parents are trying to sue for the mistreatment of their special ed child. And that's a tort. And get this, if you file a tort, you have to first tell the school board you're going to sue them under the
Why?
Governmental Torts Claim Act.
And
Okay.
this Oklahoma or federal?
Oh, there's a federal one for the federal agencies and
Uh-huh.
government, and then but this is an Oklahoma one that governs all the Oklahoma agencies and things. Now, the idea, what is it? Good intentions doesn't make good policy.
Right.
The intention is that since there are, if you go into a lawsuit, it's a little bit of a gamble. Will you
Hmm.
win or will you lose?
Hmm.
So before you spend a lot of money in a lawsuit, they're saying, that the board should be able to investigate the case to see what happened, what the circumstances are, and be able to determine for themselves what they think their liability is and settle the case without having to go to court to save taxpayers money. Now,
Okay.
that would happen in a private corporation, right? You'd go to the board, uh, you know, uh, and they would the lawyers would recommend and say, no, let's pay this off. Here's the nuisance
It'll be
value.
cheaper to do this. Yeah, right,
Right.
right. Okay. But
Instead of
what you're
going to
saying
court.
is that this law requires that you telegraph your punch in a way that you wouldn't for a private institution,
Right. You might
right?
not.
So
Right. And here's the thing. They supposed to have the taxpayer dollars at interest. That's why they got that 90 days to assess.
Mhm.
Tell me tell me a government agency that puts taxpayers' dollars at the heart of a decision making.
Right.
This
Not a
isn't
single
coming
one.
out of their pockets, so
Right.
they have no incentive really uh,
To
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 settle these cases. And
Oh,
so
so you're saying
they
you're saying that this actually, instead of a private company, because it's their money, because they have the actual interest
talk
in it.
about, their
They,
share value.
right, that they have an interest to settle nuisance claims or to settle something without going into court, but a government agency like a school board does not, because it's not their money and they're not trying to make more money. They're just trying to put in whatever policies they're talking about. So they are actually de-incentivized from settling in these cases. So they shouldn't be offered the 90-day, they shouldn't be offered you have to tell them that you're going to sue them before you sue them.
I'll be honest. I'm not sure what the right thing is because I understand why they did it,
Uh-huh.
but maybe it shouldn't be a closed door decision.
Oh,
All right,
what
we're supposed
and
to
what do you
be
mean?
Open Records Act,
Ah.
right? This is a
Mhm.
decision affecting taxpayers' money, but it's also affecting a person in your community.
Mhm.
Because right,
Right.
if it's a student, so why not air out all the facts and let people know how you're settling or not settling this, and
Yeah.
and and how
And they're
much
not
attorney
required to do
fees.
that now?
No, I do not think that this one. I think and I'm playing on outside of you know intimate knowledge of these kind of cases, but my guess is that because you may have a school employee involved, or you got a student, and all that is so confidential, so we couldn't possibly air out this stuff in a public school meeting. No
Right.
way.
Right. Right. Yeah, I
They
get that.
hide a lot behind that.
Yeah. So let's get to the TRO. So what
So
what is
yeah,
it?
the
What is it?
TR
What was that for and what did it accomplish?
okay, so what we ask is that they not be allowed to enforce the ban. And with the TRO,
And
uh,
this is for the Timber Island case in Owasso. So
right,
right.
and
Mhm.
it's so we're just right off the bat, we need to stop the injuries accumulating. So
Mhm.
don't let them act on it until you have a chance to hear some of the issue. Then what you do, but the TRO is statutorily limited to a very short time because I can deal with the judge on that, and I don't necessarily, I'm supposed to do my best, but I don't necessarily have to wait for them to be available for a hearing. And you can sort of see why, because they
Yeah.
could. Okay, so we get it, but it's 14 days at the max, which is what we got, and then we have to have a hearing on the facts. Uh, or on the issues to determine whether he'll give us a ban. Uh, uh, that's probably the wrong word if we're talking about ban, which they would say you cannot enforce until the end of the hearing. We'll
Where they
see.
restrained the school board from banning the parent.
Right.
Right.
So we 2 weeks later we actually had a hearing. This was a part of a good many hearing because we got to bring witnesses and they got to bring witnesses. Now, other than Tim, who I don't. I mean, there were a couple of others, but they he had it lined up. The two victims,
Okay.
Brent England and the Tulsa World journalist, and then every board member and the superintendent, and this is supposed to be just a morning hearing. So, uh, and I wasn't sure what was going to happen. Was he just going to hear legal arguments? So, I really didn't come in with a full blown, okay, here's what I need to prove the case.
Right.
But everybody I needed was already on his list. So that's basically, we played it that way. Tim was great on the witness stand. Um, and the, the superintendent she actually kind of showed her hand. I mean, there was no way she could answer this,
So what was the
defend
claim?
what they
What was the
did.
claim? What was the claim of the school board was making to be able to do this?
That he was disruptive. Well, and this is another thing, that these two laws have got to be cleaned up.
Okay.
There's a law in Title 70, which is your education law, and there's a law in Title 21, which is your criminal law. Well, both of them kind of go to banning the parent. The one in the school board, or in the school Title 70, says that the superintendent or a designee has the authority to remove somebody from the property if they are disrupting, or being a disruption to classroom learning and activity, or to the orderly business of the school. Okay, now you can see why that might be needed.
Hmm.
Again, Bob, we're getting into discretion. It's our biggest, you know.
Right.
So they use that to say they had the right to remove him. Now, there is a correlative, like I said, in the criminal statute that says that for any institutional uh, institute of education, that whoever is the chief administrator or can delegate has the authority to remove someone that is being a threat to the conduct of orderly business or the school, blah, blah, blah. And that then they can decide to ban him for, up to do a ban for 6 months being removed from the property. So they're saying that what his behavior was disruptive, because people should be able to get to their cars easily without the fear of being waylaid or yelled at or called names, right?
Hmm.
Uh, and that therefore they had the 6 months ban. And this, I would hate to, I wouldn't want to do the research to see how many times they've used that to discipline a parent they don't like. Because if you think about, even if you see the parking lot videos that they have,
Hmm.
there was no disruption. The reporter could get in his car, put his stuff away. He rolled down his window and said goodbye and drove off. He didn't like having the conversation. Of course, I think there was some history there, at least with Ron Cosby, that so it wasn't warm and fuzzy feelings. Probably the same
Right.
way I'd feel about a lot of MSNBC guys,
Right. Right.
you know. But he got to leave, and it was like 17 seconds. So we were arguing that where there was no disruption in the moment, uh, that they couldn't rely on the 70 statute, and that only demonstrates it was a pretext for really punishing for his speech.
Okay.
Eh,
So then, how did the superintendent? You said that she kind of how did she step on it, so to speak? How did
Well,
she?
she's trying to describe and go through the parking lot video,
Hmm.
and uh, I, I would encourage anyone to go, because that's all on. I
Right.
think
Yeah.
it's
It's all
still
online.
available on Facebook,
Right. Right.
and
Right.
say, well, where's the disruption? What did he do?
So she's on. So she's on the stand. So she's on the stand, and she's trying to
Interpreting.
describe to interpret and describe and interpret a video that was obviously not what she's claimed it to be, right?
Right.
And that ended up hurting her because she's sitting there trying to describe something the judge can see while she's describing it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so let me ask you this question before we move forward with that, because if you were the lawyer of the other side, would you have told the school board to drop this claim based upon what you've seen? I know that you're biased, but let's put on your objective hat. You're a lawyer.
I'm
Would
a
you have?
lawyer and I have to decide whether I want to take this case,
Right,
right?
right,
And I'm nonprofit and I'm a
right,
pro bono. And do
right,
I want to spend my wills, arguing a case where they can prove it?
right.
No, no, they
Right.
could. I
Well,
do.
but hold
Yeah.
on. Now put yourself in the seat of the they're on retainer. They get paid no matter what. So they basically just say,
Not, I don't think on the lawsuits.
oh, they don't. Okay. So
I don't think they're,
if
they're
you
retainers everyday questions.
okay. So if you were in their position the way they are, and would would you have told the school board to just drop this and just undo this? You're not going to win.
Yeah. Well, and I've in a corporation, and I'm in the
Uh huh.
legal department of the corporation. I can guarantee you that most of the time that's what the lawyers are going to tell you. And
Uh
they're
huh.
probably saying for a half dozen people that are watching us now. They go to a lawyer, especially in your divorce case, and they'll say, "Don't fight that. You're going to spend more lawyer fees than you'll ever recoup. That
Right.
you'll ever, for what it's worth.
So
Give up
why
the
do
house."
because it's obvious through the video, and that's what I'm trying to get at here is I've seen the video, I've looked at it. It was all very, I don't know, it was all too clever by half, and just in terms of the timing and when everything happened. But I try to put. I'm not a lawyer, but I've worked a lot with legal issues, and more so than maybe the normal person. And I've spent enough time with lawyers to go, if any lawyer that I've worked with or talked to, looking at this video, if they were doing their job, would tell the school board to back off and stop this because you're gonna lose. You're gonna lose. I mean, that just based upon the facts of the case, the actual facts of what you could see on a video, the facts of what uh, you can prove. And I guess that's what I'm saying is that they gave you the TRO and they gave you the things they gave because it's pretty obvious what happened. So why would a lawyer who's supposed to be doing their job advise a client to fight something that seems like this much of a losing case?
Let me ask you though, who's the client?
Right, the school board,
And
right? The
right.
taxpayer, I guess.
Who should be the client? Now, see, there's two different questions here. Who is
Yeah,
the client and who should be the client? The school board outside counsel is hired by the school board. They're paid by the school board, and the school board isn't using their own money. And they want to keep their power and they want to use the law to uh, kind of, well,
manipulate.
to punish you for trying to question their power. And they think, you know, one, you're either paying the lawyer fees, or two, hey, we know who she is. She's a one person pro bono, you know, we
We're
will
gonna
just
bury
work
her.
her to, yeah, that.
Hmm.
So, where is the proper incentive uh, or regulation that manages this relationship? I brought up again with Sherry because she's got such, she's willing to listen, and I
Hmm.
love that about her.
Yeah.
And and I was talking to her. Well, there is an actual law that governs Oklahoma agencies about when and how they can retain outside counsel.
Hmm.
They can't just go out and hire outside counsel on their own. They have to go through the AG's office and
Oh,
they have
okay.
to demonstrate why uh, the AG can't represent them on the agency's behalf, because that's who the people's lawyer is, and you're an agency, part of
Of the
government,
government.
working
Yeah.
for the people. So we
Hmm.
should be the ones to, and if we can't, if you have an in-house counsel, why can't they do it? And then they want to know, what's the issue, what are your estimated attorney fees? They're going to be the first group that's going to pass on whether that outside counsel is needed to protect taxpayers and the people's interest. You know,
So let me
that's
get this straight. Now let me make one connection. So we said that one law firm represents 300 of the 500 firms, and for
yeah.
each of or 300 of the 500 school boards in the state of Oklahoma, and the attorney general's office had to approve that law firm representing each school board
No, they
individually.
don't. There's no they
Oh,
don't.
they don't.
This is just Oklahoma agencies
Oh,
and
just agencies, but not the
agencies
school boards.
like the state health department or even the see those
So,
kind of executive
oh, okay, I
agencies.
see. So you're saying that the AG's office should have purview or at least some say in if they're not going to defend the school board as a state agency because they're funded by state taxpayer dollars, then the the AG should have the same kind of veto power over whether or not this firm represents that school board.
Well, that would be a logical place to
Hmm.
put some supervision over these relationships because the AG's office, as more than probably others really think about, when they go and argue a case, it's the people,
Mm.
right? It's the people. What are the people ready to proceed? I mean, we see it all the time. And, so uh, and if the school board are elected officials and they're supposed to be operating on behalf of the people, and they really need a defense, the first place they should go uh, is the AG's office. If they have in-house attorneys, honestly, I believe that that should still have some supervision. Now, that's may not solve our problems because it just depends on who we elect as an AG. I mean, there's so much politics there,
Right.
but it's at least a place to start and not have uh, a school board that has so set itself up against parents, and then we're giving them an endless pocket to use the court system and the law as another bullying
Against the
tool
people who are
against
actually paying for it.
right.
Yeah, it seems to be a sustainable model, if you will. It's like, oh, okay, well, we're going and this situation. So you won this TRO.
And we won the
You
temporary. So
okay? So what's the difference between the TRO and the temporary?
TRO we can get even without the defendant being there to argue
Right.
the
So you won
opposite
that, and
side,
then you went to court
but a short
for
term.
right,
Yeah.
and then so
Then
until you could get in court,
right.
right?
And then
And
you convert the TRO into a preliminary injunction. That means that tries to keep the parties, the status quo between the parties,
okay,
i.e., before the ban. So you get a temporary injunction against them enforcing the ban until the trial's over.
okay, and so you got the temporary injunction.
Right. And now
Eh,
we were supposed to be going to trial, but you know that uh,
yeah,
I sort of am anxious. I've tried to tell people, this case was the only thing I could do.
yeah.
It just took so much, all the pleadings and preparing, and
They
now you're going
buried
to
you.
add
They buried you, right? I
right,
mean,
and this would have been. There is no way if we go if he finds another turn, there's no way the other side isn't going to bury them with paper and discovery
mhm,
and it's just me and my husband helps me a lot, but
right.
there's just so many. We won, and because they were under such a focus, a PR focus, a public focus about
Mhm,
what they had done, and since
mhm.
it was related to books, they cratered, right? And they gave the Owasso parents revised library school book policy that will hopefully be enforced enough to get rid of the uh,
Right, and
unseen books.
so the case is essentially done.
As
I
far as
mean,
I'm concerned.
no, but I'm talking about
Yeah,
practically,
yeah.
right? There's nothing else to do because you can't get punitive damages, right? I
No,
mean, because there wasn't enough sustained harm because of the TRO. The TRO stopped the harm almost as soon as it started, right? And then so there was no quantifiable money to be earned to continue,
right.
right? I mean, like
The only quantifiable money is a little bit of lost income that
a
he
little
had
bit,
because he couldn't do his second job,
but
and
that was
my
only
attorney and my
right. But
attorney fees if we were to win. But they agreed. They were getting a jury trial, and honestly, Tim, I'd rather trust. It's a roll of a dice with judges these days, but
yes,
I don't know
yeah,
what a jury would look like.
right. Yeah, a jury could be very, very difficult. And in terms of the so you I guess you would have to you could prove or go for emotional distress if you wanted more money than that.
Well, if
Could
he
you do
really
that?
wanted money, he could file a claim uh, under federal law, Section 1983, since we did end up in federal court,
Okay.
uh, which is a where you have a constitutional claim, you can file under Section 1983 for damages that could include the constitutional violation. I still haven't, because this is a whole new area for me and I've done
Right.
the research, but I haven't found how do you convert a constitutional harm to money?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So, I
So
mean, so
so
all
but
I saw was more work for me. So I
with,
thought, let
without
somebody
without
else.
with without much promise of any return for either of you, right?
Yeah,
What because what
it was
you
going to
took
be
the
a risk. But if
what
we were
you
going to do it, he needed a lawyer that had a lot more experience in that field. And
right,
having brought it this far and won on the issues we did, I would have I would think that there's some lawyer that would say, hey, the legal issues have really been prepped for me. I just got to get through the trial and convince a jury.
right.
So, and
But
then you'd have to amend the petition to include the 1983, but there might have been more money there. But, but that's up to Tim because that is about what he's going to come out of it. Because from a parent,
uh-huh.
my mission and what I wanted to accomplish, we had accomplished that. We got a change in the policy, and the school board got a couple of lumps on their heads for being a bully.
Yeah. Well, I just think all that's very interesting because to me, and let me couch this in hypothetical terms. What I look at is political theater. What I look at is media theater. What I look at is woke. If you want to determine my definition of the way I define woke, and I think it's pretty close to it, is that it's is a it's it's a systemic system of manipulation that people use using identity politics to turn the identity of organizations into a different identity than they started with, because that's wokeness in general. If I'm going to define it that way, it's a systemic effort to change the identity of communities, of organizations, of the country, of the world, really. And they use identity and things like environmentalism and those kinds of issues to cudgel people into, well, if you don't do this, you're not a good person, right? If you don't, and then if your company doesn't do this, you're not a good company. If your government doesn't do this, you're not a good government, and so it's kind of this moralistic. They use the managerial class, the policy pushers, to do this, and I just find it very interesting that this school board, this whole situation smacks to me of them. Maybe they tried to make political hay out of something and failed. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? And maybe they tried to use the taxpayer money to pay some lawyers to get them past an election to say, look, these people are crazy, right? That's possible.
Right.
You could also say, and that's worth the risk. That's why the law firm's going to take it, because if we show that this parent gets smacked down and it's public,
Right.
then other parents are going to be less likely to do it.
Well,
And
and we should, let's just acknowledge that it has, the momentum's been on their side,
right,
because there's so few cases out there, and I have to admit, it it takes a personality like Tim to, I want to be in that theater. Let's go and do it.
yeah,
Uh, the
yeah, he seemed prepped and ready. I mean, like even to the extent of just the months and months leading up to it. But it and you got to have somebody that's willing to do that. And I don't know. I just, for starters, I don't trust the political system at all. Especially when it comes to the political system that you see in public, because if there's one thing that the last 4 or 5 years have taught me, and even in my own situations, is that narrative, it's a very postmodern world, meaning that the truth, or the story that gets uh, repeated the most often and the loudest, is the one that sustains what the truth becomes, regardless of the facts, in
you're
in in
right.
the in the eye of the public. And that works directly against the law, and the law is sometimes, or oftentimes, weaponized to help create that narrative.
But let me say, if we keep the judicial system as honest as we can about what their role is, i.e., of the originalists,
Hmm.
then you're right about the political system on the legislative front.
Hmm.
I would say. Uh, but if we know that's what battle they're fight, that's where they're really winning the battle. That ministerial, how they and how that ministerial, all that functioning has taken control of our lawmakers.
Hmm.
We have to be able to know how to fight on that in that arena. And so one of the things, and I think that Ryan would actually agree, would tell you the same story.
Ryan Walters.
Yeah, when
Hmm.
he first ran, he was talking about what he would do, and I started just laughing out loud. I mean, I couldn't help it as a lawyer. This stuff may sound good to everybody who's voting, but I know enough about the regulatory regime
Hmm. Hmm.
that it wasn't going to make any difference. So I just started laughing. And then I got a little bit tacky with him, a little bit angry. I was not a
Uh-huh.
Ryan. I was not going to vote for Ryan. I wasn't going to vote for April Grace by no means.
Uh-huh.
But, I'm just saying it's nothing's going to change. But I told him, I said, "Do you realize you are the most powerful person, that as state superintendent, you'd be the most powerful person over people's everyday lives as state superintendent?" I said, "You have the power over every teacher certificate in this state, over every principal certificate in this state. You have the power over the accreditation of every school district in this state. You have uh, the leadership role and the capability. Forget the legislature. You can control the regulations that are being adopted to enforce those statutes,
Right. So you get
right?
to actually make the rules of the legislation. You
Yeah,
and then you are the enforcer of those rules,
right. And if
right?
they don't, and the accreditation, because the one place these guys are going to get hit, the school boards, is going to be in their funding, and accreditation affects your funding. And and it's not just controlling. You don't just get to control like how much of the cultural um, ideologue is getting taught. You get to tell them, you got to turn these reading levels around. You've got to do better about math, or you're not going to get your funding. If you're going to fail the students, you're going to fail financially. He has that capability to, to exercise that level of power. Now, will he? Or will the people that are a part of the deep state of the education system say, "Oh, you can't do that"? You know, he
Hmm.
has a chance to be the Trump of the Oklahoma Department of Education and for the education of our children. Uh,
So it's a huge opportunity, but he needs to know what he can and can't do, and he needs to know what all the he needs good lawyers,
yeah.
right? I mean,
Well, and I hope, but but so far, most of the education lawyers I know are all brought up in the system. And
yeah,
what brought Trump down? The
right.
people in the system,
That's exactly right. Yeah.
So, I'm still cheering him on and I'm hoping, but but, I'll be the first to laugh if he gets, taken down the wrong path again,
Well, yeah, well, we don't want to laugh. I mean,
So
I get what you're saying. I get the
bittersweet.
sentiment. Yeah, it's
I
bittersweet,
told you
but
that,
I told you that. Yeah, well, and I've had some of the same conversations with Ryan. It's like, man, I really hope that when you get in there, you've got to clean. I told him you got to clean house. You've got to clean house. Everybody that's there is operating under the mindset of a different. It's an Oklahoma deep state, so to
Yeah,
speak. And whether you're talking about lawyers, you're talking about pencil pushers, you're talking about heads of departments, you're talking about all kinds of things like that. If there is true opposition between what Ryan wants to do and what Joy Hoffmeister wanted to do, which in part I believe and in part I do not. I think there's more in common than meets the eye, but there are definite differences. That you have to you have to put your people around you, the people that you've met, that worked for you, that share your vision for what you want it to be. And we used to have that in government, by the way. They called it a patronage system a little bit, right? And
yeah,
that's not necessarily a great thing, but in terms of the executive branch of government, it helped. When you would have, you know, the transition from James K. Polk to the next president. I'm talking back then, right?
yeah,
That the whole government shifted at once. Every person, top to bottom. That was part of the system. Now you have this static middle
yeah.
that never moves, that has a different agenda than the person running it. And I think that's what you're getting at, is that, hey, there are going to be people here.
I lost you, I think.
Oh, there we go. Can you get me? Okay.
I don't want to miss any of your words of wisdom. So,
No, 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 no. But they could sabotage you, right? They could sabotage you and really harm
yeah.
what you want to do.
Well,
And
like
no
I
matter
said, I
how,
think Trump, like him personally or not, Trump is the epitome of that story. Is
yeah,
the example of what you're laying out.
yeah.
And
And
if
it
we don't learn from that observation, we're never going to be able to take back. We won't be in a position to take back our government.
right. Well, and I want to make one point on that. And I'm interested to know your thoughts on this because Ryan Ryan's a great person, and I've spent some time with him. I've spent a lot of time talking. He's asked me for advice. I mean, look at what he ran on. Don't think
Yeah.
that didn't have anything to do with the guy who's got the channel. Okay, so because I've been talking to him about that issue since May.
He does listen to
Yes, he does
people
listen. He does, and
more
that's
so
good.
than any politician I've ever interacted with, and being working for large corporations that's trying to affect energy policy, I've met a lot of politicians,
Yeah, yeah,
state
no,
and federal.
and that's
He's
what I'm
great.
saying. But that he's great. But what I'm saying is that he he ran on the anti woke, for lack of a better word. He ran on the radicalization of schools.
Mhm.
That's what he ran on. So whether
Yeah,
you want to call it wokeness, you want to call it critical theory or queer theory or gender issues, he ran on the cultural issues that affect schools directly, and that's what won him the office.
Yeah,
He
I
narr
will agree, but I do think we got to give him one more credit because
yeah,
it really sort of started, and the root of his concern with all the cultural aspects is it's crowded out academics.
yes,
And
yeah,
right,
no,
so
that's right.
I want so I don't want to ignore the part of the platform that says, you know, we got to do something about how our kids
No,
aren't
no,
learning.
that's
Right?
right.
Yeah.
He successfully, which is my point the whole time. If you go back to my earliest videos, to my earliest writings that came out,
Uh-huh.
was this is affecting because I got into this because I saw it taking over my subject, what I taught, because it
Yeah.
replaces uh, just like Norman Public Schools DEI. Uh, uh, executive director said, we want you to embed this in everything you do, not in addition to what you do, meaning that eventually it's designed to take it over. And so that he made that connection, and that's that. Yeah, let's not bifurcate the fact, oh, he just ran on, crazy. No, he made the connection of how the cultural issues are actually affecting the education of your kid. That's why he won.
Yeah.
And but but now it's shifted into this, what I'm seeing, because I'm very connected to a national platform, Twitter, with national level people,
Yeah.
where it's, well, this was a school choice election. And I didn't hear him mention that through the entire, he avoided it. He avoided that term.
He got pushed into it because they put him in a defensive mood, mo- defensive position to
Against
say
school choice.
something,
Right.
you know. And I know people that were big Ryan supporters that was concerned about that the election was going to school choice, and I told him many times, yeah, yeah,
Hmm.
that's right. But I
Hmm.
told him many times, you can say, you know, just acknowledge that there's a problem with our education system, and that's why people want school choice.
Hmm.
But I'm in this election because if we have school choice, I want public education to be the first choice, and
Yeah.
that's what we should strive for.
Right.
That was kind of where I was trying to help him frame some of the vernacular,
Right. But what
and
I
I think he tried to get there.
Yeah, but my point is that he didn't win this election off of school choice. He won the election based upon the fact
Oh,
that there's a problem in schools, and
school
there was a
choice is
culture.
a symptom.
Well, school
Right.
choice is a could be a fix for it, but he never. But I watched him, right.
If you want
The
us not to do school choice,
Yeah, you would need to
because
fix the
that's the
public
well,
schools,
that's the
right?
word. It's
Yeah,
fallout. It's the fallout. You
but
got
I
to
get that.
change.
But here's
Right.
here's where I'm going to make the distinction. Ryan is pro school choice in
Yeah.
the nth degree, okay, and meaning that I don't think he thinks it will destroy public schools. I think that he wants to help public schools. I believe that, but if it were that were to happen, he would be okay with it. In the long term, in the final analysis, I think he would be like, well, if we have better schools in school choice schools, then I'm okay. I would be, and I'm speaking hypothetically about what I think, not what he
Yeah.
said.
Yeah.
Okay, and but here's my concern: is this is my point, that I'm concerned that pertaining to what we talked about with the deep state in Oklahoma
Right.
education. I'm concerned that Ryan could be a fall boy, a fall guy. That he came in and he's got this, that those who want
This
school
Boy
choice.
Scout cheer.
Right, well, no, but those who want school choice will use
Oh,
any
yeah.
cultural issue at all, and they'll put anybody kind of on the plank, so to speak. And if if their failure to fix the problem in a public school helps school choice pass and helps that become the law of the land, I mean, they wouldn't, to destroy him is no loss, right? I mean, it's not.
I
and
know
and,
exactly what you're saying, um, because
and
it's
you saw the
against
same
their agenda to
thing with
fix
Epic,
public schools. The
right?
more public schools fail, the greater the demand for school choice, and they
Right.
win.
Right. And I've had very high people, in that whole battle look at me and say, the only reason we're interested in critical race theory, the only reason we're interested, these are, it's a quote, is because we want to pass school choice. And then I saw instances, not necessarily in Oklahoma sometimes, but where you actually have things created where you didn't need to create them to make things seem worse than they were, in order to say, well, here we've got the predetermined solution. Here it is, guys. And look, we're and I'm not arguing the merits of school choice right now. I'm arguing the tactics to get there, because that's my focus of my channel. Is wokeness is a series of tactics, and they use the law, or they use manipulation of language. They use all the things that we've talked about today, whether it's the intersection between the school board and private firms, between the school board and the taxpayer, the school board and the media. And they use the intersections between all of these things to push an agenda in order to sell the populace a predetermined solution. And when that solution won't fix the problems that the won't necessarily fix the problems that the populace is being sold it for. You know what I mean? That's
Yeah. One of my concerns is that he's been, and I think you said it in a way I hadn't even thought about it, was that people are pinning a lot of hopes on Ryan,
Mhm.
and in a way, so many hopes that he's bound to fail. He's going to fail some sector,
Right.
and
And that's
then
and
all of us that have been fighting for the parent, this parent, uh,
movement. Yeah.
yeah, superior rights, we're going to be way, way back. And
No, what we're
that's
going to be,
why
what we're going to be is pushed to the only solution on the table, which is that's my
yeah,
problem. Is
yeah,
the only
well,
solution on the table when it comes, if Ryan it doesn't succeed, or if Ryan has issues, or if they sabotage him, or if anything like that, right? School choice is the only option on the table for
but what
fixing.
it, but
For
what is
when
school
I mean,
choice? That's
no, no, no,
and we're
no,
going
no,
to
no.
be
Hold on.
looking right. Yeah,
Don't
go
misconstrue
ahead.
what I'm saying. Don't misconstrue what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that it's the only option they're offering. It's not the only actual option. There are other
Right.
options
Yeah.
to fix what the problem is, but it's the establishment Republican Party in this state has wrapped their brains and their agenda around school choice, because it comes with a monetary incentive for business. And that's what I'm
Okay.
saying. And so they're making it, in the eyes of the public, if Ryan fails, or if they sabotage him, or if something happens, that the media and the establishment Republican push in this state that control it are going to go, well, the only way to save your kids from this radicalism now is to
You're
is
right.
to put the money, in taxpayer money, into a public private partnership. And that, because that's what school choice is.
That's a democratic term that Republicans use, and it sinks the conservative independent thinker
Listen,
every
what
time.
the Mussolini defined fascism as, he said, it should have been called corporatism, because what it is a merger of state and corporate power.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Well,
And
you want to understand how it works.
right. And we've turned
Energy.
conservatism into corporatism for some reason in this country.
Well,
We've said that you
energy is the corporate, right? Public utility.
uh-huh.
And those utilities, they basically say, we'll do whatever you want to do, government, as long as we're getting our money back. We,
Mm-hmm.
as long as we get to put whatever money we spend back into the rates and the ratepayers pay it, we'll do whatever you want. So,
Mm-hmm.
okay. So you start to own the state corporation commissions, and the public partnership, private partnership becomes just what you said, private public collusion.
Yeah, but here's what it does.
Yeah.
And this is what I want everyone to understand when it comes to education. I think it's probably the same for energy, is that when you have that kind of collusion, what will happen with schools is it's not going to eliminate public schools. I
No,
want everyone to
no.
know that. What it will do is it will turn private schools into public schools, except that the private schools will lack one main, very important mechanism that Marie, that Legal Overwatch and Maria and Tim have exemplified. The ability to go to a school board that's responsible to the populace through a vote and take them to court based upon government and open, transparent policies. A private school has none of that. A private school is the university model. A private school has a board of regents that nobody knows, that you can stack with people from corporations who will make money off of the money following the child, because you now monetize the child. Because once you attach the money to the child and the child passes the door of the school, it does sever the ties, but it severs the ties of parents being able to actually make hay out of what might be going on in the school. It eliminates transparency, and it eliminates uh, the ability for a parent to vote their way out of the problem. You can vote with your feet, but I'm telling you, is there may be lots of little mom and pop schools that pop up, but eventually, when you have corporations throwing money in, like with colleges, right? When you have corporations throwing money in and donating to the schools, because now they can do that. You can't donate to public schools just a blanket fund to build 17 buildings and then they can use it for whatever they want, right? Google will dump tons of money into a school, make every teacher there make $100,000, which you've heard the governor talk about, but the parents won't, and those are going to be the schools that everybody wants to go to, right? And the state money is going to be funding that. And but what the parent loses with that is the ability to fight back about what's at the school. And eventually you're going to see a Walmartification of education. There used to be all kinds of Kmarts or little mom and pop shops. There used to be all kinds of those kinds of places. But what happened was eventually big corporations took all of those things out of the market. And now you can only go to a Walmart or Walmart equivalent like Target. It's the same store with a different sign. It's, you know what I mean? It's the same store with the same products with a different sticker on them. And that's choice turns into not, oh, you're going to have tons of choices. Choice turns into multiple choice. You're going to have, oh, the Apple school, the Amazon school, the Walmart school, and the other corporate school. And they're all going to be doing the same thing. They're all going to be
Well,
monetizing their thing.
we don't learn from our mistakes, because what you're describing is the kind of government private partnerships that
It's
exist, that
fascism.
fuel Google, the type that
Yeah,
fuels Amazon, the types that fuel Goldman Sachs. I mean, I go to Bank of America and I love my little branch down here and the people in it, where near where I live. But you know, they're they're telling me that the Second Amendment doesn't mean anything because they won't give a line of credit to stores that carry gun. I mean,
yeah,
so if you are concerned about how corporate America is getting involved in the cultural life you have to live, then you better be concerned when, these
right.
businesses start to figure out there's money to be earned. Here's one thing though. My husband has lectured me many times on this, and we're sort of on the same page. We talk about wanting school choice. We talk about what should be done in public schools. But the fact is, we don't know what a good school looks like. We haven't stopped and said, from an independent, conservative, Christian, and Muslim, Jewish, whatever faith you are, but what do we think a good school is that should fit into a culture that has all these different multiple cultural views? What does a good school look like? And uh, he has started drafting from, because he took a nothing was more regulated than energy after Carter.
Yeah,
He had the fuel use bill, so Oklahoma couldn't even use its own natural gas. It all had to be used for heating, and we trucked it up. So he took a heavily regulated industry as a team member of a small group when Reagan was put in, deregulate, create market. And so they started with a blank sheet and they said, constrained only by the physical properties that around the production and transportation. Just what you have to do to move it. That's the only constraint. No past existing policy. No, well, that'll never. That's politically unfeasible. What would we want the natural gas industry to look like? And they started there, and they designed it out, and then they looked at where the rules were, and then it was his job as a lawyer on it to develop this a regulatory process by which they could get rid of regulation, strip the regulation to create the most free market on energy the United States has ever had. He's suggesting that we need to do something with that in education. We need a group of people, from mixed walks, from inside, outside, but come together. And what do you want your student to look like? And what school do you want your child to go through for the best for your child? And he calls it a North Star kind of uh, uh, design,
Mhm.
or
And who
project.
is this? Who is this again?
This is my husband.
Oh, your husband. Good. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, who he was. Like I said, he went to work in D.C. when Ronald Reagan was president at FERC, and that was the mission that he got assigned to. And he's very proud because we wouldn't be energy independent if they hadn't laid that free market groundwork. Because pipelines were the only they had monopsony control over production of gas to the delivery. They were the only ones. If you want to use our pipeline, you have to go through us. We'll buy it and we'll sell it to the local distribution company. So he is a free market advocate. And we're not thinking in terms of, when we think about school choice, we don't talk about a market. Eh,
Mm,
You know, we're so used to it being regulated and controlled by government, but we're trying to say, well, we can free it a little bit here and free it a little bit there, and we're going to fix it,
right.
until we let the progressives have a marketplace where they can buy the most progressive education they want, and we can go and buy our own. I mean, let's have a radical idea. Don't
Right.
tax us for
Right.
education.
Well, and
Yet let us
that's
keep
the
our
issue here.
money.
But that's the issue here. That's what people don't understand is that the government is not giving you a choice in a free market because the market is not free.
Right.
There are lots of incentives that the government gives and lots of incentives that corporations give to the market. And this is all when you went and you said that Bank of America won't give money to people who sell guns. That's ESG. That's the S in ESG. That's social
Hey, that
and
started with the environmentalists, people should
mm-hmm.
know. It
Yep.
started with them. I was working on
He
my
is environmental social justice.
social justice, right.
Right. Right. And that is
Yeah,
go ahead.
I had gone back to school, trying to get more of my arms around the environmentalist movement and where it was going to go with energy. So I went back to Yale University to their environmental studies group, and that was the big push of everybody who came on campus and talked about energy. We need to add this and make them address it, because if they address it in their 401, they're going to address it to please us, so we won't downgrade their stock. They knew what they were doing, and so it's just an easy little push to expand that more. It, it, uh, I can't tell you how many times I tried to fight that
Right.
in different ways. People, and the other thing is, people don't understand what a free market is because they never experienced in free markets in the United States. We've gotten to regulate everything, but I do think there is a key to education turnaround if we would start to evaluate it from a free market. I beat up Ryan and Stitt on that uh, last bill that almost got passed. I said, you don't know what you pass this
Which
bill.
bill?
on school choice.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
You know, so
Hmm.
you don't even know how many private schools we have. You
Hmm.
know, you're choking. Our regulations are choking charter schools. People talk about Arizona. Do you know one reason Arizona is successful because they have uh, the I don't want to say easy because I don't know how people interpret it, but they have more charter schools being built than private schools, even with their school choice,
Hmm.
because however they regulate charter schools, it's so much easier to meet, So,
But a charter school is still subject to the regulations and the oversight of the government, which, if you want to get down to brass tacks, government by the people for the people, right?
yeah,
That are responsible to the voter, which is the parent. And that's what I hate about this. I feel like the school choice movement, which has existed for 40 or 50 years, um, and maybe actually 100 years if you want to go back to the Netherlands and things like that, where they have they have grabbed a hold of, if not helped cause, a lot of these social issues in order to sell something that nobody was going for the term vouchers, right? Nobody was going for the term of, oh, well, we need to defund, we need to take tax money and funnel it into what's going to become corporate schools. Nobody was going for that because nobody wanted to give up their ability to control what was going on in the public schools, right? Nobody wanted to dilute that.
yeah,
And and I'm not saying, I'm not arguing the merit either way, but I know that when you school choice is the most funded government or the most funded education initiative in the history of mankind. It is the most well funded education initiative in
oh
the
yeah,
history of mankind.
yeah,
And
I get it. And
and
people say, well, at least it's a baby step.
no, 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 but school choice, they won't, like the woke, they won't define it for you. They won't say this is what it is. They'll say this is what it will create, but they won't give you the policy, right? And then when you try to argue the policy, they hit you with talking points. Well, let the money follow the child. No, don't let the be enemy.
You
Don't
want you
don't
want
let the perfect be the enemy of the good.
right.
Don't let, I mean, all these little slogans, and I'm like, I'm not interested in your slogan. Tell me what you're going to do with the policy. Where are the protections going to be? How are you going to make sure that the government won't be able to put ties over public schools
And
or
then
private
what
schools? You
and where
know,
we're going to fight, we're going to be fighting the government instead of making sure our kids are getting educated.
right?
To sort of support your point about the corporate school, I would challenge people to look at
Mm,
KIPP,
mm-hmm.
Microsoft. That's a corporate school, and they
Yeah,
may be having some good success, but I know they're woke. I know
yeah.
they're teaching. I have a relative who, goes from school to school and inspects what they're doing. And, well, at least they may be up in the reading proficiency, but you're getting all these other things as part of that corporate structure. And again, but, you know, a corporate school is not developing free market. One place I think that we could help on that, though, is because Oklahoma, we have the little neighborhoods, pod schools or whatever. We
Mm-hmm.
have all kinds of ways to create a uh, parent fueled school where the fueling being the kids, and all you do, and then you can pay a teacher. We've got a lot of freedom to create, to be very innovative in how we're meeting our children's academic needs. But uh, but you also point to the university monopoly. But we have control over what our teachers know that they should
Mm-hmm.
be teaching through the
Mm-hmm.
teaching certificate. And second, you know, uh, we should make, you know, we already have, even the public schools on a lot of way are corporate, right? Because they're buying the canned programs. I've had teachers, I didn't realize this myself until I started really, talking to a few teachers that are looking for help for freedom too. But they're told they're not allowed to create their own curriculum. When I was teaching freshman comp, I figured out what books I wanted. I figured out what assignments, and I figured out my own grading. And if something didn't work, then I could change it up. right? To get results. If teachers aren't allowed to be teachers, then we're relying on experts to tell them how to teach and what to teach in the classroom. Because I think there are uh, that when American schools were really at their best, it was when teachers were responsible and obligated to teach their own curriculum.
Yeah.
And then they had that connection with what is working with my student. It's so easy. Throw in, an epic, one of those epic um, curriculum programs, that they look and they start doing and then when something doesn't, when the kids aren't learning, you just say, well, I used your program. I think one of kids Gits's problem is she knows her schools are failing and she doesn't know what to do about it. And so, hey, experts out in the world, tell me how to fix this. And so she's bringing all the experts in, which are driven by corporations that, do better if
Hmm.
people aren't family and people are just working, you know? So,
That's a good
yeah,
point. Yeah, yeah.
I think that one area Ryan could do a lot is working with the people who are designing. Uh, our, our our teachers, do they really know American history? What do they know? And if they don't know it, throw them. Nope, you're not getting to teach in Oklahoma. And if OU starts having a failure rate of 40-50% of teachers graduating from the school not getting a certificate here, they'd have to start to look at their program. You know, People, when they're looking at a law school, they're saying, what's the bar rate for passing there? And if they see that 30% of the graduates there aren't getting their law license because they weren't prepped enough to take the
Hmm.
test, they changed that. So that is an early step. If we just started teaching our teachers, or making our teachers be teachers again, making them connect with the student in that very personal way. uh, if 70% of our teachers can't read, excuse me, 70% of our graduates can't read, but more than 30% are going to colleges. Where do you think the students are going? What degrees do you think they're heading for? Uh, that they think they can at least graduate with? Because
Yeah.
it's not nursing, it's not medicine, it's not the hard science, engineering. It's the soft, and with the kind of CRT and the social justice issues that are now plaguing our the courses in the education school. That's where they're going. If they can't even read at 12th grade proficiency when they graduate high school, how good of a teacher do you think they're going to be? So
Right.
we
Well,
gotta we gotta change those issues and get teachers that like to teach, and then they'll say, I don't need to go to this school and teach. I don't like that. I'll
but
go and
that brings us full circle because
yeah,
the school choices being presented right now is the university model. And the reason why we have teachers that don't know American history is because we have a university system that is promoting those teachers out of with bachelor's degrees to go out and teach what they know as history. And they're actually in reinforcing what they think they know as history. And that is a whole social movement that is brought about by DEI, which I've been telling Ryan and the governor about since October of 2020 when I first sat down with them both. It's and they've avoided it. That honestly pisses me off. It's like uh, nobody's talking about the university system and the fact that the University of Oklahoma, the flagship university in the reddest state in the country, is
yeah,
one of the most woke institutions in
institution,
the country. It
yeah.
has got, I mean, one of the largest colleges devoted to spreading this across the world that
And
anybody's
their
ever known.
answer, and instead of using the shortage as an opportunity to create a different pool of teachers to choose
The teacher
from,
shortage, you mean? Yep.
Yeah, they're just trying to hype up and say, "Well, where do we find more college? Oh, well, we'll let more people from the Northeast,
Right,
come
yeah,
into
yeah. More and more
Oklahoma."
people from California, more and more people from
Yeah.
Google,
I
more and more
I
people from yeah. I mean,
I
it's
told, I was telling, Sherry, just I mean, because I knew it wasn't feasible, but I would love to take one of our small colleges and just turn it into a teacher college and bring in the ideas of teaching that is about teaching. How do kids learn? How do they develop? A little Montessori type,
mhm,
approach.
mm,
Teach teachers something outside that whole woke environment to teach what it
mhm,
means to be able to to help students learn. And I said the first thing I do is, bring in any vet who's served their 4 years, you know, um, that carries a gun today, and give them say we waive all your general requirements because that's just woke indoctrination anyway,
mhm,
and we'll give you 2 years of learning how to teach, and you'll come out with a certificate, and that 2 years is free. I
yeah.
you know I bet you
Well,
we could
yeah, I mean,
fill our
that's an
teaching,
interesting idea.
and you were getting a different mindset in the
Right. Yeah,
education.
yeah, you're getting people that haven't been led down the path of hating everything about the system that made them successful. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And I think that's
And in the
exactly right.
meantime, they'll have a gun for the
For the protection of the kids, right? Yeah, and
yeah.
I think it's interesting, and I want to keep having conversations with you, Maria. I want when
Oh, I
you
had so much fun.
yeah, no, this is
So
great,
thank
and
you.
let's talk about doing this on a regular basis because I think the work you're doing is invaluable. Everybody needs to support Legal Overwatch. Do you have a website you can point everybody to?
I do have a Facebook page. So if people will put, um, legal Overwatch for parents' rights. They'll come
Hmm.
to that, and there's a link to give, send, go. And in giving to that, I want people to realize and to know I am totally committed to working to representation of a parent pro bono. So what we're looking for, of course, is at this point, we're looking for is to cover court costs when we need to sue, so they don't have to come up with that. Because it's about 260 for just the filing fee with the court.
Hmm.
They add on a whole bunch of other fees. Then it's $70 to have it for a process server. And if you're suing every member in the board, that really adds up. So, and then you don't know what other expenses, for discovery, expert
Right.
witness you might need. So the cost of litigation is still expensive, but I'm committed to giving my services for free. And uh and if people are interested, the other thing and the administrative fees, because we
Hmm.
print a lot of
Right.
paper,
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. You actually have to
and
have.
mailing costs. It all really adds up so that you can't really exist out of your own pocket. But the thing I think I want to watch for is in the next year, where I'm going to be testing Ryan by filing a lot of complaint cases against districts, against superintendents and teachers. Now, school board members are not subject to any uh, oversight per se, like a superintendent is by the OSDE.
Hmm.
So that's where the accreditation, we're going to be filing on a lot of accreditation. Uh, I'm hoping to get one prepared for against TPS for failing to, you know, comply with the legal processes on the sex education. We didn't
Hmm.
even get to talk about
Yeah.
that in
Yeah.
the
We'll,
health
we'll do
bill.
another one about that. We'll do a whole
Yeah,
episode about that.
but we're going to be I'm not going to be watching it. I'm going to let you watch it, and then you
Yeah.
tell me when we need to step in. I want people to know I depend on them alerting me when they're
Right.
when they need a lawyer.
Yeah.
I'm you know I'm trying to. I'm only have time if I'm going to do the legal part to be superficially aware. And I found out about this health fear health bill only by stumbling on it on the OSD site looking for what they're doing on the sex education things.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
I
Well,
really
we'll
need
keep in
parents'
contact.
input.
We'll keep in
Okay.
contact, and we'll keep going. Thank you so much for your work, and Maria, thank you for being here. I really appreciate it.
Well,
Really
no,
appreciate it.
thank you. And let me thank you for your work. I mean, uh, we need the heavy lifters to and that's what it is, heavy, because watching out for the language itself from a linguistic, I've studied it.
Hmm.
That is heavy lift. That's Atlas work.
Right.
I did get the
Yeah.
God right.
Yeah, you did.
We'll start calling you Atlas.
Yeah. Oh, Lord. Well, yeah. Okay. Well, thank you so much, and we'll see you soon. Okay.
Okay, thank
All right.
you.
Bye.